do it too. So we got PFT 110 again today. We're looking at chapter 4 of the weight loss manual. Again, you guys will find that on Canvas under day 3. We did 2 chapters on the first day, so our numbers are a little skewed here. Day 3, chapter 4. But chapter 4 of this little manual here. So we're looking at psychology, right? Obviously, a lot of different aspects go into talking about psychology when it comes to weight loss, right? So after completing this section, you guys will be able to understand the different obstacles that our clients might face when it comes to struggling with their weight, some strategies to help to handle those obstacles, different motivational techniques that we can use in order to push them forward. And we're going to talk a little bit about goal setting today as well, which is great. And man, I haven't gotten to talk about goal setting in a while, and I freaking love goals. Like, it's just such a fun, like, interesting, and I know it's like a soft science. Like psychology in general tends to be like a soft science, but like people sometimes misinterpret what I mean when I say that. Like soft science makes it sound like it's like flimsy or like like to be debated or not true, like like science. But what I mean is like it is specifically like hard science. It really is. It's just measured a little bit differently, which is why we call it soft. But I'm so excited. I love talking about goals. So we're gonna get a little bit into SMART goals at the end, which will be really fun. So we want to help our clients lose weight, obviously, or gain weight. We want to help our clients like change their body composition to reach whatever goals they happen to have, right? We do know that being overweight or underweight both have like different health risks. And so like if our client is struggling in either of those directions, our job is to be an expert in the industry that's going to help them, adjust so they can get to a healthy place, right? So obviously that does come down to energy expenditure versus energy input. I know I sound like a broken record here. Been saying that a lot every day lately, but it's true, right? So a lot of times, like, okay, like I can accept all that. I accept that it's energy and energy. It's fine, great. Stop talking about it. Like, it's like, dude, we get it. But how do we actually do it? Like, what's the, like, where are we? Like, what adjustments are we making here? Like, how do I actually apply these adjustments? You want me to do this? How do I apply that to my life? You know what I mean? How do I make it easy so I don't fall off the wagon? So often people who are like struggling to lose or gain weight are honestly like that is accompanied with like a lot of different like psychological issues, which obviously like we are not here to be therapists. Like I can't stress that enough. Like in the same way that we are not dietitians who prescribe exercise, we also don't prescribe psychological treatment. But at the same time, if we can coach and motivate our clients, and inspire them, that is exactly what we're going for. So we want to make sure that we understand a little bit about the psychological principles, even if we're not necessarily applying like therapy, because the more motivational we can be, the more likely our client is to successfully stick to their goals, right? So being overweight or obese is definitely associated with some psychological stress. There's a lot of like social stigma in the world. I think we're working to overcome that over the last decade or so. We're working, to sort of come in line with healthier and healthier options for people, which is great. But it still has like a lot of like, there's still a substantial kind of connection to this old idea that basically the goal is to be as thin as possible, and it's like that's certainly not the goal. Like our goal should be to be as healthy as possible, and if that means that you need to be thinner or more muscular or just more athletic or whatever, right, that's going to be a much more true answer. And so like that's I think what people often struggle with. We see low self-esteem associated with and poor body image. So, just talking about like what we mean when we say like body image, giving that like a very clear definition, it's how an individual perceives themselves. It is their image of their body, right? It could be the sensations or the perceptions that they feel versus like the rest of the world. And like that definitely has like emotional consequences in a lot of ways, right? So when it comes to an individual who's like struggling with poor body image, there are some habits that kind of come along with that. They'll oftentimes like avoid mirrors, or any physical activity, especially in group settings, because it might be uncomfortable. They might avoid certain social situations, and sometimes they might even have like displacement of like, where like the blame kind of goes in terms of like, their overall like body image, right? And so that version is like where they might have like a really harsh outlook on themselves that can be really negative, or or someone else externally. But when we're talking about body image, right, it sort of manifests itself in a much more severe version, which we call body dysmorphia. Body dysmorphia is this idea. It is we're going to define it as a preoccupation with an imagined, or at least a perceived, physical defect, right? So like someone will sort of have this sort of predispositions, premeditation is a good word for it, where they're just constantly thinking about it, with some version of like a perceived flaw that they have, right? Um, so someone sees themselves as like not tall enough, right? And so they are constantly avoiding situations where, that is going to be exaggerated, or, they might make changes in their lifestyle to help themselves appear tall, or they might have like a skin condition, right? And then they are continually like picking at that skin condition, in an attempt to kind of hide it. And honestly, that oftentimes like makes it worse, right? Or they might be like overweight or underweight. And so, but the thing is, a lot of times they might actually be very healthy. The skin might not be that bad. They might be, they might not be as short as possible, or they might like be perfectly healthy. Um, but they have this perception of this flaw, right? And so their reality is very different from well, their experience is very different than reality, I should say, right? And so they have this sort of preoccupation there, and so what ends up happening is they're continually thinking about it. It's continually causing like stress in their life, and they are, going to probably make unhealthy decisions in order to address it, right? So, I mean, look at how many like people who buy, all of these different weight loss drugs, which we know can have some negative side effects. Like, hydroxycut is like a really big one, right? Like hydroxycut was really popular for a long time, and it's basically, I mean, if you look at the ingredients, I'm gonna do this incognito. I really do not want to get hydroxycut ads because I'll just be angry on a daily basis. I don't need to do that to myself. But if you look at like the ingredients, you'll see it's actually like somewhat of, like they'll put like vitamins and stuff in it, which I find nothing but ironic. That's super hard to read. But you can kind of see here, vitamin A, C, D, they got a lot of like vitamins in it and all that nonsense. But you go down here, and their weight loss complex is coffee bean, right? So it's like 200 milligrams of coffee bean, along with some acids there. So probably around 200 milligrams of like caffeine. And then they're using coffee extract. So that's another like 200 milligrams there of direct caffeine. I mean, that's actually pure caffeine. This is probably like somewhat diluted. Um, so that, and then they have these things that they believe might be related to weight loss, like cherry and fruit and lemon, like very acidic things. And they're like, oh yeah, it's very acidic. So your body's going to work to, take care of that. And then they put a little probiotic in there so that it doesn't cause as much. The original versions of hydroxycut used to cause a lot of gastrointestinal problems for people. So they put probiotics in here because here's the thing about having like so much caffeine. Caffeine is a diuretic, which means you're going to pee more often, and you're going to go number two a lot more often. It basically makes your body kind of run those things faster. So that's what they're putting in here. So really, it's just a massive amount of caffeine. I mean, at the end of the day, like that's the easiest way to kind of summarize what hydroxycut and a lot of these, weight loss supplements are. And so if you have a lot of caffeine running through your body all day, you're probably just going to be doing a little bit of this. It's just a little amped up. But that also causes like vasoconstriction and dilation in certain blood vessels. So then you have like blood pressure problems. There's definitely negative side effects associated with medication, supplements like that, right? So someone with body dysmorphia is going to go, well, I've read about those negative things, but that seems a far cry better than I used that backwards. That seems a lot better than, this thing that I'm struggling with, which is how I look in this way or that way or whatever, right? Somebody who goes to the tanning bed way too often because they see themselves as like really pale and they're like, I know it causes skin cancer, but I don't like the way I look, right? Like that's a very simplified version of like how body dysmorphia sort of functions. So how do we sort of combat this, right? Well, we'll get to that in a little bit, but one of the things that we want to remember is this idea of, how somebody feels about themselves, right? And that is, we're going to define that as self-esteem, right? Like the esteem that you have of someone is like how much you trust or like them or, favorably view them, right? So self-esteem is a broad definition, but basically it encompasses all of the positive feelings of yourself, right? It's how you see yourself, it's your feelings of self-worth, right? So there's kind of two sides of self-esteem. um there is the self-efficacy side of things and the self-perception side of things. So your self-efficacy, which is always like one of those weird, it's like one of those words with like a weird rhythm, so I feel like it's hard to say. But self-efficacy, very different than like self-efficiency. I hear people use those two words backwards all the time, and I'm like, ah. But self-efficacy is how it's not how efficient you see yourself; it's how effective you see yourself. So it's a measure of the confidence that you can successfully perform an activity or a task, right? Like ask yourself, guys, do you believe that you are capable of achieving the things that you set out to achieve? It's the simplest way to kind of measure your self-efficacy, right? If you see yourself as like, yes, I am certainly capable of doing these things, right? That shows that you have high self-efficacy, right? One of my favorite compliments to like to give Lindsay, I love saying all the time, like just a very simple sentence, like it's not a complicated compliment at all. But I love just saying, oh man, you're so good at stuff. And I just love like saying that all the time because like to me that's about the biggest compliment you can give someone, where it's like just stuff, what stuff, and it's like stuff, undefined stuff in general, and like if you believe that about yourself as well, it's like, yeah, I'm good at stuff, right? Like that's a sign that you have very high self-efficacy, right? So like I can set out to achieve a weight gain or a weight loss goal. I can set out to achieve like a physical fitness goal, right? I can set out to achieve a goal that I'm setting for myself at work or financially or, emotionally in my relationships. Like these are your beliefs of self-efficacy. So a lot of times, like people who have been on diets, and thanks to a lot of times to the diet industry, or thanks a lot of time to lack of understanding of how stuff functions, people have very low self-efficacy, right? People will often really struggle with having a belief that they are just generally effective at stuff, right? So with that, that might reduce their what we call self-perception. Your self-perception is how you see yourself. Your body image is part of that. Your place in the world is part of that. If you don't see yourself as valuable as someone else, that can be a problem. And so when we look at this, right, there's a lot of things that kind of go into your self-efficacy. There is experience. There's vicarious experience, which that one's interesting, but vicarious experience is basically like if I tell you an interesting story about someone doing something and succeeding, and you're like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. So clearly it's possible. You're kind of living, you're kind of like putting yourself in that person's like view and you're like living vicariously through them. Um, that's a classic. Like if you ever watch motivational videos or stories about stuff that kind of get you amped up, that's an example of vicarious experience. Social persuasion, like people saying you've got this, and obviously like pumping you up and getting you excited about stuff. That is also a part of self-efficacy. So the more people you surround yourself that are very positive, that believe in you, the more likely you are to have positive self-efficacy. And physiologic feedback, the feelings that you are experiencing yourself. So all of these things kind of lead to improved self-efficacy, which then lead to improved like behavior and performance, right? I know it's kind of silly, but the idea of fake it till you make it is actually pretty damn good advice, if I do say so myself. I am a big fan of that concept. If you just walk places confidently, usually people will not hassle you. I had ironically, he was a psychology teacher too, so this story is double layered. I had a teacher, Dale Flowers. And Dale Flowers was the most interesting teacher I think I've ever had. And he was my psychology teacher, which is funny. But he wasn't that, I'll be honest, he wasn't that great of a teacher. He was basically he would get up, do a little bit of lecture. He would then like be like, all right, everybody, we're gonna do some quiet reading time, read this chapter here. And then we would talk about it afterwards, and then you would do a homework that was very clearly directly out of, the pre-made homework that the textbook had, which was really easy to find the answers online. So it was one of those things where like he did the exact, but I actually learned quite a lot from him because what he was very good at was telling very interesting stories that had a lot to do with whatever topic we were talking about. So again, vicarious experience is a really good one. But Dale Flowers, for all my vets in here, by the way, you guys will particularly love this. He was a mechanic in, I want to say, the Army. I could be misquoting, but I think he was in the Army. And he will tell you to this day, he knows nothing about cars. Not one thing. And yet he was a mechanic for years. I mean, he got his, start to finish, paid his way through college on the GI Bill. So like how do you be a mechanic without knowing anything about cars? Like how do you not learn anything? And apparently his strategy, what he would do is he would grab like a toolbox and he would walk pretty intensely as if he was kind of in a hurry around the base all day. Just that's all he would do. Like he would just be like kind of in a hurry with like a look on his face like he was really trying to get somewhere. And no one would ever ask him any questions. And then when he would be like back in the motor pool and he had to like put stuff away, he would like there was a pegboard and it had the outline shape of every tool and where it went. And so he would always do that job and put stuff back. And that's the only, it would be labeled, but he had no idea what a blah 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 was for a car. Like, and I remember thinking that was like that's a really interesting story, but it goes to show you like how far you can get with like a little bit of confidence, um and I've always loved that story. But that's kind of an example of a vicarious experience, like just telling that story. But like that is an example of him very much just like having, he was like, well, I believe that as long as I have enough confidence to act like I know what I'm doing, and as long as I have enough confidence to answer people, and that's like he would occasionally get people who would ask him questions, and he would always have the same answer. It'd be like he's like, oh, he's like, hey, the so and so's doing this, it's making this kind of sound. And then you go, oh, okay, well, take it out to the field, just take it out here and just run the carbon out of it, is what he would tell people. Which I don't know anything about cars, but I do know this: running the carbon out of a car, what that means is turn it on. Like which is very funny to me. But people would just accept that, and he made it through did a full however many years to get his college paid for. So just to show you how much like confidence can really go a long ways, which is why a lot of times we are going to work to improve our clients' confidence. So you look at these kind of ideas of like self-perceptions, right? There's a couple different like ways that it works. Like you have your attitudes, which affect your behaviors, and you have your behaviors that affect your attitudes, right? Again, if you truly don't even necessarily believe something, but you just kind of make yourself do it, you'll actually probably do fine most of the time. But that is a very hard thing to believe sometimes, you know? Um, so because that's hard to believe, this is something that we want to consistently practice, right? So clients with low self-esteem, right? One of the biggest things that they are sort of like struggling with is this like overall like fear of failure, right? They have a low self-esteem because they probably don't perceive them. Their self-perception is probably low, right? They don't see themselves as positive or worthy, right? Which is not good and healthy. But they also don't see themselves as like effective, right? They don't see themselves as like capable of succeeding in things in general, right? So low self-esteem is a huge blockade for a lot of clients, and fear of failure is up there. So how do we sort of combat that, right? Well, we want to build up our clients' confidence. One of the ways that we do that is by choosing exercises and choosing intensities that we know that our clients can succeed at, while also like still pushing them to feel like they are working really hard, right? So when we push someone to the limits of like, their capabilities without pushing them to where they are truly like consistently at failure, that's the type of thing that leads to much more effective, positive change. And it has very positive benefits on improving individual like self-efficacy, right? They're like, oh, I guess I can succeed because every time we've done this, I've consistently gotten a little bit better. It's another reason, guys, why I love food journaling and why I love workout journals. Like, I just love data. The more information you have is like, look at all this data, right? Like, all of these things have been improving. I'll have a client who will, this will happen a lot, by the way. Remember how I told you guys, don't forget, lean body mass is not the same as muscle mass, right? Muscle mass is part of lean body mass for sure, but it's your water weight, right? Is your lean body mass plus all the other stuff. And then muscle mass is in there. So a lot of times like clients will go on a diet, they'll lose some fat, and then they'll also like have take a pretty hard hit to their lean body mass in like the first couple weeks. And it freaks people out. And it's one of those things where it's like, look, I can explain all day that most of that is like glycogen water weight, but at the end of the day, like what's going to really kind of help them and keep them feeling positive is the fact that like, I love to show them their workout journal and it's like, look, let's say you did lose a little bit of muscle. Like worst case scenario, you lost a couple grams of like skeletal muscle. Strength is not always 100% determined by muscle size. And your strength is very clearly going up. Look, we can see it track every time. So that's another reason why workout journals are so great, because they can bail out your clients like psychological, you know, breakdown, right? So when we're talking about improving our clients' self-confidence, right, and self-efficacy, they are kind of used interchangeably, but there is a slight difference between the two, right? Self-efficacy refers to like this conviction that you have that you can execute specific behaviors, whereas self-confidence is usually like, I can perform a physical task successfully, right? Like, honestly, if you made me hold a basketball at like a free throw line and be like, hey, you got to make 10 of these in a row, my self-confidence for doing that is not high. I'm definitely not making 10 free throws in a row. God, I probably wouldn't make five free throws in a row. I am horrible at basketball. However, so that's my self-confidence, and that's not super high in that specific task. But that doesn't necessarily mean that I have low self-efficacy, because I still believe that, like, well, here's the thing. If I wanted to put the effort in and get good at free throws and practice them, I do believe that like my behaviors can affect positive change overall. And I could get there and get to a place where I could do that. Right? Like that's the difference. That's like a very secure efficacious belief, right? Efficacious, I think. That's a belief that you have a lot of self-efficacy, right? So again, that's what we want to get our clients to, right? We want to get our clients to a place where they firmly believe that, look, you may fail today on squatting 225, but do you believe that you are going to get there eventually as we continue training? Do you believe that you have the ability to squat 225 through like proper technique training and things like that? That's sometimes clients don't have that. They're like, no, I'm frustrated. I'm never going to get there. That shows low self-efficacy, low self-esteem, right? So now we know that we need to make some adjustments, right? We need to work on our clients' mobility, and maybe that's what's holding them back with their squats. We need to work on their strength in some ways, right? And work on that, right? We need to like come up with a strategy that's going to help push them forward. That's the coaching role of things, right? Again, we're not therapists. A therapist would hopefully give them specific exercises and things like that that they can perform in their life to improve like their psychological symptoms and stuff. That's not our job, right? That's not what we're going for. What we're going for is just effectively improving our client in exercise. And maybe we are setting up like a structure that as we take them through that exercise routine, it has super positive benefits on like their motivation and self-efficacy, right? So that's a big that's one side of things. We know that is definitely associated with individuals who are struggling with their weight, right? It's these people who have been like, I've done every diet in the book and I've never reached my goals, right? That's a classic line you will hear a lot in this industry. So again, something we are trying to sort of combat. So if we're trying to improve someone's self-efficacy and we want to come up with a good strategy, one of the things that we should probably do is figure out what are some of the other aspects of what are holding them back from success, right? And so like what are their triggers to eating, right? A lot of times, guys, it's going to be stress and certain like depressive moods, right? And so stress, to understand stress, you have to remember that like a good chunk of it is a biologic component that is actually very healthy for us, but we've crafted a world that does way too much of it. Like cortisol, right? Cortisol is a stress hormone. Now, it is a stress hormone that is associated with overeating and fat storage in particular. So what's the deal with that? Like, why would we make, your body makes cortisol. Why would your body make this friggin' stupid stress me out? Like, why would our bodies like do that? That's super frustrating, right? Here's the thing. It does that because like originally cortisol was really important, like again, if a bear burst through my door over there and just like ran into this room and then like I was just like, oh, look at that fluffy little thing, oh, those are some sharp teeth, wow, that's cool, like that is not going to keep me alive. Like that is not helping this scenario. What helps this scenario is making stress hormones, cortisol, adrenaline, things that are going to promote me, amping up my entire body to give me the strength and metabolism necessary to hopefully run away from this wild animal, right? That's what cortisol, that's what adrenaline, that's what things are like that are for, right? But throughout the course of human history, we've created a much more safe and much more convenient world. And so now the ways that we, are very safe, that's really great. But unfortunately, we found and invented new, very distinct ways to get very stressed out. We invented, I'm gonna throw my own profession under the bus here. We invented homework. We invented bills. We invented taxes. We invented appointments. All these things that like, stress us out, right? And so like when you live in a world where you are continually not getting enough sleep and you are continually dealing with like stress, what happens is that your body is continually in fight or flight mode, and your body's like, oh, we must not have eaten in 6 days. This is a stressful situation. Let's go into fat storage mode, right? And that's very much what cortisol does. So this is next time we get some calories, we're going to overeat a little bit. Right. And so that's a cortisol production. There's a really, I'm not going to show it because it's not fully appropriate. But if you guys want like a kind of a funny video to watch, College Humor does this video about, it's like a commercial for like, like Bennigan's is like a chain of like family whatever restaurants. um they make this like video called Stressigans, and it was like people who are really stressed out at work, and so they'll take like their lunch break and they go and they'll just eat anything. Like and the commercial's like, yeah, you just eat it right here in the kitchen while you're standing rather than enjoying yourself like at a booth. And they're all just like really and they're just eating and like their eyes are closed, like they're really stressed out. It's a very funny commercial that is kind of commentary on being stressed out. But that's what stress does to us, right? It often causes like very much overeating. It inhibits the production of leptin, which is that hormone that helps you feel full, and stimulates the production of ghrelin. So literally a double whammy there. It particularly triggers lipogenesis, which is the production of fat cells. And so it is definitely like a hormone that we are trying to avoid, right? So now if we've got a client who's extremely stressed out and their body is sort of going into this like fat building, overeating place, and obviously maybe our client is like really trying to avoid this through like, some version of body dysmorphia or something like that, right? This can sometimes lead to eating disorders or disordered eating in general, right? Which is behaviors like binging or purging or food restriction, fasting, diet pills, diuretics, use of laxatives, really dangerous things, right? So obviously we are not diagnosed. We don't ever diagnose, right, guys? These should all be based on the DSM. I think it's DSM-5 now, actually. By like an actual like psychiatrist. But talking about like these eating disorders, just so we know what they are. So if we recognize them, we can instruct our clients to maybe talk to a professional. Anorexia is one. This is an intense fear of excessive body fat, highly associated with extreme examples of body dysmorphia, and generally a body weight that is below 85% of the expected or below 18.5 on the body mass index scale. Very, very dangerous because, again, we know that is heavily associated with hormone interruptions, disrupted hormones, disrupted metabolism, a lot of really dangerous things. Bulimia nervosa, also heavily associated with this. With that is somebody who will often try to avoid eating certain amounts of food, and then what will happen is they will end up oftentimes like binging because eventually like willpower gives in. Willpower is a very exhaustible resource. So then what ends up happening is like they feel extreme feelings of guilt, and due to those extreme feelings of guilt, then they will often try to find ways to purge those calories from the body. And that's either from like laxatives or extreme amounts of exercise, vomiting, diet pills like hydroxycut, things like that. Then there's other versions as well. There's also just like binge eating disorder, which is somebody who also struggles, but they don't necessarily like purge. That usually results in lots of weight gain because we're very bad at measuring our calories when we consume massive amounts of calories in one sitting. So this can lead to dehydration, electrolyte disturbances. It can lead to low blood sugar, decreased muscle mass, and increased fat mass. Remember, fat is a much less metabolically active tissue than muscle is. Hormonal disturbances, and even things in really extreme cases like amenorrhea, which is like a disruption of like women's menstrual cycle, which has problems with like bone density, estrogen production, progesterone, lots of problems. So if that's the case, right? If these are some really negative things, then what we need to do is have a strategy in place to avoid some of these negative aspects. I mean, like losing weight or gaining weight can be a really ugly aspect sometimes because, like, again, people are oftentimes willing to do anything to get these results, including like things that are unhealthy, right? And we certainly don't want that to be the case. So when it comes to like communicating with our clients, you know, what some of our strategies that we're going to implement is, we are going to, number one, dress appropriately when we are interacting with our client. And what I mean by that is like we are not we want to make sure that we dress the part for our job so that our client is feeling feeling important enough during the session. Does that make sense? Like we want to make sure that we dress professionally because that is indicating to our client that we are putting effort and that we care about their success. And it sounds a little weird, but it is just one of those like external, sort of nonverbal communication things. Um, that's a really big one, actually. Did anybody? I was talking about The Last of Us. Has anybody watched the most recent episode of Last of Us, episode 3? Anybody get into that yet? Oh man.
Nope, I'm crying because of it, but nope,
Oh
not
wait, you're crying because did you watch it?
crying because I haven't yet, and it's like weighing on my shoulder. It's like go watch it now.
You think you're crying now? You wait till you watch the episode.
Uh,
It's so good. Um, Without spoiling anything, there's a really great line in that episode which talks about caring about our appearance and caring about the things around us is how we show love, which is a really interesting line in the episode. If you get a chance, it's great. And it's also like that's one of the things that we also communicate to our clients, right? We want to make sure that we are non-verbally communicating as well as verbally communicating that we care about our client's success. So we want to have as many strategies as possible to do that. Another one is posture. That's actually a big one as well. This is a very closed off posture, which oftentimes communicates that we are not necessarily listening to our client. This is certainly a posture that we are indicating that we are not listening to our clients, right? Definitely something we're trying to avoid. So how you carry yourself is also sending like a very positive message. And it is, it's part of our job, right? Um, Speaking on that, active listening is kind of a part of I think active listening is actually down here, but it's a communication strategy that actually involves like eye contact and showing a client that you are listening. I always say this because I'm a great example of this. But when I was a kid, my mom would always accuse me. She was like, "Hey, listen." And I was like, "I was listening." She's like, "Yes, but you're not hearing me," is what she would always say. And it's because like I would be able to repeat back what she said, but like just because I knew the words didn't really mean that I got the meaning, and my mom would always like call me out on that. I was like, touching can actually be a really positive impact on people, right? Don't forget, obviously, it should always be appropriate, but like a handshake, high fives, pat on the back, all those things are like really encouraging. And again, we go back to this just one slide, a couple slides ago. You look at like how to improve self-efficacy, that social persuasion aspect of things, like, telling someone, hey, like you're doing great, keep it up, right? That like high five, as dorky as it seems, is a really good way to communicate that like our client is like reaching success and they're like, all right, I guess I'm on the right track. Practice your listening skills, learning how to communicate with your clients. That is a really big part of this job. Learn about their likes, learn about their dislikes, learn about their challenges. And my favorite thing, learn to identify with those challenges. Like that is a skill that you can really practice. And like I have never really dealt with like disordered eating. personally. I've never really dealt with extreme being extremely overweight or anything like that. But like I've certainly been frustrated with my own performance in certain aspects of my life and like been like, man, like I am just hitting a roadblock here and I'm just not sure if I'm gonna get there. And I've been in that like no man's land of like, where my confidence is shaking and breaking apart. We've all had that. There's no way anybody in this call has not had those moments. Um, so sharing with your client, like, hey, I remember one time like I was dealing with this, doesn't have to be a direct allegory, but it can certainly be like a connection because the emotional journey is similar, right? And so just taking that time to like connect with your client on that human level is great. Keep it professional, right? Like there should always be like a somewhat professional barrier between you and your client. This is a professional relationship. But it doesn't mean that it's not coming from a place of caring. I did just say this the other night. I'm not gonna recap the whole thing. Um, but like I was just talking the other night about like how easy it is to get taken advantage of by like the company you work for. And there's a really great TED talk by the CEO of Netflix, and he is talking about I was talking to Felicity about this because it seems like she's getting a little taken advantage of, just a little bit. It's easy to get taken advantage of in corporate jobs. And I think that sometimes like companies will often weaponize this idea of like we're a family, right? And they'll be like, no, we're a family, so I can ask you for favors like you would a family member. And that sounds really good, but the CEO of Netflix is like, we are not a family, we are a business. It's like, and you hear that and it kind of sounds a little icky at first. You're like, oh, it sounds like, oh, how uncaring. But then you realize, like, look, here's the thing. If we were a family, I can ask for inappropriate favors. Like your uncle can guilt you into driving him to the airport. You know what I mean? Like your mom can guilt you into like sacrificing, your time to do certain things. Like he's like, if I weaponize this idea that like we're a family, it allows me to take advantage of my employees. And so no, we are not a family. We are a company and we all care very much about each other. He's like, that's not what I'm trying to communicate. And I'm like, we definitely care. But it's very important that we don't, step over this professional line. There should be a certain like if I'm like, I know your paycheck's late, but like the family is struggling right now, like weaponizing that guilt and that affection that you have. And I was like, man, what an interesting way to think about it. And I love that. I think it's really fascinating. My roommate mentioned it the other day. So I was watching that TED talk. But that's kind of like something that we are kind of trying to avoid. So like again, you want to make sure that like you can encourage like practice your listening skills when your client tells you something, you know, if that invokes like an experience that you've had, repeat back to them repeating that sort of like empathy with them is a really good example of like saying like I heard everything that you said, and because I heard it all, this is my experience as well, and then we can pivot that into here's how I got over it, and maintain that professional distance. Don't share anything that's inappropriate or anything like that, but like that's really helpful. Facial expressions, another one. Again, eye contact, right? Be direct. This is a really good one. Do not avoid direct communication, guys. This is another one that like this is like a big one for me. There's a really huge difference between like being good and like being nice. I think a lot of times like people often like unknowingly, to be fair, but unknowingly sort of weaponize being like nice. They'll I remember like I'll give you a great example of when I was a kid, like first girlfriend, right? Wasn't feeling it anymore, wanted to break up, but also didn't want to hurt her feelings. And so I just kind of distanced myself from her as much as possible and kind of avoided her. It's like middle school, by the way. But like that's not good. What would have been good is like, look, I don't want to date anymore. Like it's direct. Yes, it hurts, but it's like it's a hurt that somebody can then immediately begin the process of getting over. you know, rather than like dragging it out, which is something that like I think men in the room, I think this is something we do a lot more. just to be honest. Um, rather than just like being direct with someone. We don't want to hurt someone's feelings. So then we give them like a flimsy, like, it's like, hey, are you free this weekend? And it's like, you're not free. You know you're not free. But you're like, yeah, maybe. Right. And it's like, no, just say, no, you know what? Unfortunately, no. But like being direct and straightforward is much better, like rather than like a client who's continually showing up late, a client who's continually not doing their homework, they're continually not meeting their goals, and be like, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. Sometimes it's better to just be like, look, these are not your target behaviors. That's not okay. Like, if you want to meet your goals, we got to be better. How do I help you? Because I'm still invested. I'm your trainer. How do I help you be better? That's a lot better, guys. That is much better communication in the long run. It feels a little bit uncomfortable, but the better you get at that, the realer you can be, the better. Better results, better for your clients, better everything. So one of the ways you can do this, by the way, is help your clients by managing expectations as best you can. Be as clear as possible from the beginning. Be as upfront as possible from the beginning. That way, you are going to avoid any unwanted outcomes. Lindsay and I were apartment. We signed our lease yesterday for our first apartment together, which I'm really excited about. But we signed the lease yesterday, and like I had a million. The guy was so casual. He like walked in and he's like, yeah, you guys are gonna do great. It's a really great building, blah, 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 all this and that. And I was like, what's the policy on this? What's the policy on that? Blah, blah, blah. What if we did this? What if we did this? What if we did? And he was like, oh yeah, it's all this. And I was like, these are a lot of really, and I was like, I appreciate you. I love how casual and fun and laid back you are, but like I want concrete answers for this, and this. Like, because like I do not want to run into a scenario where like I drill something into the wall and then later it's like, hey, like you drilled this thing and we don't allow drilling. I will 100% be going into that apartment. I will take a picture of every corner, every floor. And so that way, like we move out, we get our entire security deposit back. I do it in every place I move into. It's not because I don't trust them. It's not because I'm like being stingy or anything like that. It is because like, I don't really love, having to get into a confrontation with people about stuff all the time. So I like to get it all out of the way in the front. And that way, like they know, I know, like we're on the same page. When my clients show up for a fitness assessment, first thing I do, introduce myself. Second thing I do every single time is I give them a really brief rundown on what the entire session is going to look like. Like, all right, so we're going to head over to the sales desk over here. We're going to get you to do some paperwork. Got to make sure that, we get you to sign some waivers. And then after that, we're going to go do some body composition stuff. That way I can get some baseline statistics for you. We'll take you upstairs. I'm going to put you through a little bit of a workout. That way we can see how you're doing fitness wise. We'll come back to this desk down here. I'm going to get you a program, and then I love to use this line. And this is a little like something I've been doing for years that's a little overconfident. I'm not saying you actually have to do this to do sales. But then I will literally say at the very end, and then I'm going to try and sell you on some training. But I love to like, a lot of people like try to tiptoe around the idea that they're like doing like a sales session. I love to meet it head on, it's one of my favorite things because it shows that like I'm really confident. And it also like doesn't blindside the client into this awkward transition of like, so do you think you want to sign up for training? Do you want to pay me? Like I don't like that. I like being super direct right from the beginning. It's great. And that's the thing. Talk about like being direct. Like your client is struggling with like disordered eating. Be direct and be like, hey, like that's a struggle. We both know it's unhealthy, right? Who have you talked to about it? How do we get you like, like have you talked to a therapist, right? Have you told your friends? Have you told your family? It's uncomfortable, guys, but trust me, it is definitely better for your client. Be complete, be specific, give them all the information. That's the same as being direct. I kind of bled into this one. But yeah, give your client a full understanding. Again, manage their expectations. Reinforce with repetition. That's another one. You should always be super consistent. Don't change your policies, guys. This is one of the reasons why, like, again, this whole in-person meetup change thing is driving me a little crazy. Because it's a change. And while changes are good and fine, I don't like the fact that it's inconsistent. I would have much rather it rolled out at the beginning of a mod or something like that. But that didn't happen. So we are rolling with the punches. But if it doesn't work out, that's okay. But just always be consistent with your message. That's a really big one. Now, a couple other things. I think this is probably one of the biggest ones. Focus on one thing at a time. Don't let your client get scattered. You don't want your client to get super scattered very, very easily by focusing on way too many things at once. Guys, we are not very good at changing our habits. We're really not. What I mean by that is, like, a lot of times, like, if you're trying to change like all bunch of habits all at once, like people who have like a million New Year's resolutions, for instance, that's really difficult because we are creatures of habit. And I know, like, all of us are a little bit different. We might be a little bit more laid back in our personalities or a little bit more structured or whatever. But regardless of like your personality type, we're really just not that good at changing too many things all at once. And so, like, when we try to make like big changes in our lives, it's really important to kind of master one thing at a time. This is why, like, I always encourage my clients. They're like, all right, how many times a week am I doing homework and exercising? What is my diet going to look like? Can you help me with like my sleep patterns? What supplements should I get on? All these like different big changes that they're trying to adopt. And I always tell my clients the same thing. I'm like, look, try to eat as many colorful meals as you can, but honestly, for this month, what I want you to mostly focus on is just showing up for all of our appointments on time, because your appointments with me are where you're going to work the hardest, and that's where you're going to get the most bang for your buck. Master that and get used to showing up at a schedule, because I also am pretty strict about scheduling all my clients for the same time. I don't like to do appointments like Monday at 10, Tuesday at 9, Thursday. Like, I really don't like doing that. I like 8 a.m. for all. I like a straight line through the week. Again, that's better for my clients because it's consistent. So I love having that consistency. So I'll focus on that first. Then I'll be like, all right, now I want you to focus on getting into the gym this many times per week consistently. Right. One of my favorite tools for that, by the way, here's a pro tip for you guys. If you are having trouble like getting up on time, just right now, go change your alarm and change it to the same thing Monday through Friday. Just set all the days, do it right now. Same time. Not like, oh, I get to sleep in an extra half hour on Tuesdays because I wake up later on Tuesdays. Don't do that. Wake up at the same time and then take an extra half hour to goof around and read or something. Like, it's my favorite thing. And I'll have my client do it right in front of me. I'll be like, all right, what days are you working out? Set an alarm here, 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 here. And I'll have them do it. And I'm like, now you are not allowed to touch that alarm for the next 4 weeks. And like, that small little change has been super effective. It works on every client I've used. I use it all the time. And then be supportive. Don't make sarcastic jokes about weight or composition or anything like that. I mean, that should be pretty obvious. Don't use negative comparisons to your clients. Don't sound judgmental. You are trying to always be as supportive and building up your client as possible. And then always practice what you preach. This is my I always forget about this slide. This is not an Asim slide. This is a Steve slide. My I guess it doesn't work anymore, but like coworker put that in years ago. Okay, so now we understand a little bit about like a bunch of general tips, and like which of these is the best one. I don't think it works that way. I think these are just all general things that you can work on to be the best trainer possible. And that's a lot of what this chapter looks like. When you guys go to read this chapter, you'll notice that like basically every one of these bullet points is kind of like what I just did. you'll notice it'll be like, be supportive, and then it'll give you a paragraph describing what they mean by that. You're gonna see a lot of that in this chapter. Um, but let's talk about some, specific things that can actually build motivation in our clients. This is kind of fun because I get demotivated in the gym as well. I was talking about this the other night. Like for a little while there, I used to like be really harsh on CrossFit. I used to kind of bash CrossFit, and be really judgmental of it, which I think a lot of trainers are, especially if you're like me, like, and you guys are going to be like me. Corrective exercise trainers in particular tend to be really critical of CrossFit simply because people have told, there's a lot of stories of how many people have gotten hurt doing CrossFit. Here's the thing. I will not say that like the CrossFit workouts are dangerous. I don't like using that term. A lot of trainers have used that term. I don't particularly like that actually. And the reason I say that is because anything is dangerous if it's done wrong. CrossFit in its like design is fine. It's all exercise, which is mostly safe. Now, here's the criticism I will give CrossFit, and I wish that they would do a better job of this, but I don't even know how they would. It does foster a very competitive environment. It's all about like setting your best time. It's like, or getting as many reps as you can of something in a certain time, and like setting consistent records. And setting consistent records is great for the psychology of what we're talking about today and super motivational. But it does foster a competitive environment. And I think competitive environment plus dangerous exercise or just weightlifting in general, which is inherently dangerous, even training with a trainer is that. I put those two things together, and I do think you get a recipe for a lot of human error. And that's my big criticism. But I was really like critical for a long time, and then someone was like, well, it's not really fair unless you do it. And I was like, you know what? That's true. And so I stopped training myself for I think like 2 months straight. Signed up for CrossFit and just went in anonymous and did it super consistently. I had a blast. It was super fun. I got in great shape. It wasn't very specific. I probably would have gotten better results, in some ways. By focusing specifically on one thing. It was kind of a jack of all trades, master of none style of working out, but I loved it. And it was super motivating because everybody in there was really excited. Every time you walk through the door, you get to know people and make friends. I thought it was great, honestly. um, but I get it. I get where the criticism comes from. It does foster that competitive environment, and amateurs who are doing things that are very advanced in a group setting while also being kind of competitive, people make sacrifices. Don't love that. So motivating our clients, right? There are a lot of ways you can motivate your clients. But this is a big part of our job, right? You want to be the most motivating, optimistic, excitable trainer in the gym. Any gym you work at. You want that reputation. That reputation will get you new clients, and it will obviously like lead to clients that are actually going to show up and succeed, which also just feels better for you, Um, so, a couple guidelines here for building motivation, right? One is generally people are going to be motivated by certain situations and certain personal traits that they're trying to achieve, right? Basically, if I'm putting that in a different way, people are very motivated by seeing themselves in a certain light, right? People want to have abs like so and so. People want to jump as high as this Instagram video that they saw. They want to be able to do this challenge of some type, right? That's a big motivating factor for like a lot of people, right? They're often motivated by certain traits that they're trying to achieve or certain like situations that they're in, right? So great. If we know that, excellent. Let's try to mirror that as much as we can and push our client and say like, hey, let's get you there. Let's push them from one level to the next until they are seeing themselves in that light. People also will often have a lot of different motivations. When you ask somebody like why they came to the gym, it's not just like a simple answer a lot of times, right? Oftentimes people have multiple different motives for why they're getting involved with things. So give them a couple different reasons to get involved with exercise. Keep them motivated, right? Be like, hey, do you notice how like your cardio feels better? Like going up a flight of stairs just a little bit easier, not only for like your muscles burning less, but also just your breathing less. And they're like, I do notice. And it's like, yeah, both those things are great. You notice how your clothes are fitting a little better? And they're like, my clothes are fitting a little bit better. Yeah, that's also great, right? Give them a million different reasons for why they should, get involved, right? Sometimes a change of environment can enhance motivation, which is good. We just did this. Like I said, Lindsay and I were on a 4-day split for the last few months. It was like Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and I would play Ultimate on Wednesdays. Um, so we went all 5 days this week, and like yesterday and today, she was like, "This sucks." So she's not loving it. Because we've been doing a lift like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, cardio on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And she was like, I am not loving doing cardio in the gym like consistently. And I was like, all right, changing it up. So now we're gonna get up a little earlier, and we're gonna go for hikes. I was like, all right, cardio outdoors then, and that way 3 days in the gym, 2 days out of the gym, that's all, and that's gonna be a lot more motivating, a lot more exciting. So that's a big one sometimes. Like change the environment, that can be a really good way to motivate and enhance that motivation to change it up with your clients. Doesn't have to be that. You can change up your routine. I love themes in my routines. I love doing a good theme. Month of kettlebell training. You know what I mean? Instead of like just consistently, or like I'll do a dumbbell month and I'll do a barbell month the next month. Or we'll do like moving from stabilization into moving into like heavy strength. Changing things up like that are super, super fun. High reps to low reps, medium rest to long rest to short rest. A lot of different ways you can change things up. And then you as the trainer have a huge impact on your client's motivation, right? Give 110% every time you show up for your clients, develop that personal relationship, and focus on building as much rapport with your clients as you can. Rapport is one of these definitions you see throughout your NASM textbook, not just in the weight loss one, but just in general. But it's the level of trust somebody has in another individual, right? So we want our clients to trust us and believe that like we have their best interests at heart. So that is definitely like one of the ways that we are going to build rapport. We want our clients to believe that we do have their best interests at heart. So making sure that again you are following all those rules we talked about earlier. These are all ways that like you can improve your client's belief in trusting you. Social support's another one. Sometimes like you as the trainer, that's an example of social support, but maybe it's not all of the social support they need. Maybe they need some other people that are like involved and excited about their weight loss journey, right? So encourage your clients to like share their weight loss journey with their spouse, their family members, neighbors, coworkers. Get them involved in like a group exercise class. That can be a really great way for them to meet new people that all have like the same interests at heart and are excited to help them meet their goals and stuff. Social support comes from all over different places, right? Our loved ones, our family members, our coworkers. The more people we share it with, this is why like social media is like freaking so popular. Like people are putting stuff up on like social media, posting about like and they just get like the likes and it makes you feel good. I think there's a lot of unhealthy aspects to that as well. I'm not going to talk about those because we're just talking about the building motivation parts of things. But it's one of the reasons why I like sharing your like journey, your social journey with stuff is super helpful. So that's a lot of like general tools. Taking a quick pause just to check in with you guys because I feel like I've been talking for a long time uninterrupted so far. Any questions or just like comments or Anything like that from anybody so far? You guys all right?
All good on this side.
I'll take it. Okay. All right. So let's talk about goal setting. That's my favorite. I've been rushing to get to this. Goal setting. Smart goals. So there's a couple different versions of SMART goals, right? We're gonna go ahead and this is the one I like. Yeah. There's two like hand drawing videos. I can't remember which one I like. It's all specific, measurable, actionable, relevant, and time bound. What does this one say? There's the one problem with SMART goals whenever I'm teaching it is like there are just different definitions for what this acronym stands for, and they're all the same. They all mean the same, but the words are slightly different. So like measurable, actionable, or attainable, those are the same things. Relevant or realistic, and timely. Let's go with this one.
Whether you're stocking up for the week, grabbing a bite with friends, or running to yet another meeting, every table.
You.
If you want to succeed, you need to set goals. Without them, you lack focus and direction. They also provide you with a benchmark to determine whether or not you are actually succeeding at them. We all struggle sometimes to achieve our plans, and it's not that we lack the effort, but our goals are not structured efficiently. To accomplish your objective, you need to know how to set it up properly. You can't simply say, "I wish I could make more money," and expect it to happen. A goal without a plan is just a wish. It is also important to recognize that not all objectives are created equal. So today I'll explain the SMART method of goal setting and how it will amplify your chances of actually succeeding. Let's get started. S stands for specific. We all have plenty of dreams and goals, but most of them are all generalized and vague, so we don't really know how to achieve them. Your goal must be clear and well defined. You can only get to where you want by defining precisely how you will get there. For example, let's take a look at this generalized wish. I want to be healthier, or I want to have a better body. What does all of this even mean? It's super vague and not specific enough. A better example would be, I'll replace drinking soda with water. I'll also be going to the gym 3 times a week for 45 minutes. You could be even more specific. 3 times per week could mean every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Every time at 3 p.m. Make it as specific as possible so you know what exactly you're going to be focusing on. M stands for measurable. Tracking the progress of your goal is an important part of keeping you motivated. It allows you to set milestones that you can celebrate when you achieve them and reevaluate when you don't. If your goal is simply defined as lose weight, how will you know when you have been successful? You need to define exactly how much weight you want to lose. A much better goal would be, I want to lose 10 pounds. This way you have something to aim for and you can even set smaller milestones along the way. Basically, you break that big objective into other smaller objectives. So if you think that 10 pounds is too much, you should break it down into manageable pieces. First aim for 3 pounds, then another 3, all the way up to 10. It's the progress that keeps us motivated, so if you don't have a way to measure it, you will fail with your ambition. A stands for attainable. Make sure that it's possible to achieve the dreams you set for yourself. Far too many people fall into the trap of setting impossible goals. While they may push you forward for a while, you will almost certainly end up giving up on them. Instead of being impossible, your goals should be challenging, yet achievable. There's nothing wrong with shooting for the stars, as you might end up at the moon, However, unless you want to burn out, it's much more efficient to take small steps. For example, making $1 million by the end of the month is impossible if you can't even pay your bills. A much more attainable goal would be making extra $100 by the end of the month. Once you have achieved that, you can go a step further and try making extra $200. You don't want to set yourself up for failure by trying to go far beyond the bounds of possibility. It will only make you miserable. R stands for relevant. Your plans should be relevant to the direction you want your life and career to take. A common issue we face is having too many goals at the same time, or pursuing the wrong goals. Unless your plan is relevant to your overall life plan, achieving it may not accomplish anything. So if you look at my example, I wanted to learn French because I loved the way it sounded. However, I realized that learning the language would be completely useless for me. I barely know anyone that speaks French and I don't really need to use it anywhere. So I stopped learning it as it was taking too much of my time while I was getting nothing out of it. Becoming fluent in French would be nice, but it is currently not relevant to my overall life plan. So ask yourself why you want to achieve your goal before you commit to it. T stands for time bound. This is one of the most important factors. Your plans must have a deadline. If you don't set a time limit, you have basically unlimited time to achieve your goals. When you are working on a deadline, your sense of urgency increases and you're more likely to achieve your goal. Think of your time in school. You had a whole month to write an essay, and yet it was done in the last 2 days. It's because the deadline was right around the corner, so you had no choice but to do it. So whenever you set a goal, keep a time limit in mind as it will push you to actually work on it. Now you know how to set SMART goals. But there's one last thing. Most people think that goal setting is a one-time event. Like you set your goals once and you're done. However, it's actually an ongoing process. It never ends. Your plans will need evaluation and revision, so it's important to stay flexible. Thanks for watching. Do you have any dreams or goals that you're currently working on? I, for example, have a goal to run a marathon in the next 6 months. So let me know what you're working towards in the comments below. Together we'll become better than yesterday.
Okay, I don't think it would be in there specifically. Actually. But here is a link to this video directly. I think. But yeah, it'll be in the recording. As long as I got the right video. There's another one that's also like pretty good that kind of breaks this down. But yeah, we are going to take a look at, we have a day basically dedicated to SMART goals in exercise psychology, but we're going to kind of go through them right now because these are in your text. These are kind of a big part of like just understanding goal setting in general. So when we're talking about goal setting, right? You know, it's a big important aspect of behavior change because, you know, your goals are obviously like our direction that our life is heading, but they are also, if they are structured properly, kind of instructional. You know what I mean by that? Like if you have a really well set goal, you kind of know exactly what to do in order to get there. My roommates and I play a lot of board games, and there's this game that we used to love. It's called Betrayal at the House on the Hill, and it's like it's kind of a fun, like spooky, like horror themed game. But the one thing, the more we've played it, the problem is there's kind of like one best strategy every time you play it, and it becomes really obvious because you have like a scenario and it's like, here's what you must do. And so like the scenario tells you you need to do all these things. And because of that scenario's description, you kind of know exactly how it should best play out because you're all working together. It's like a co-op game. So it's like, you do this, you do this, you do this, you do this. And by the time it gets to me, we'll win. And it kind of got kind of easy the more we started playing it. And I realized I was like, that's a really good kind of analogy for like a good SMART goal, because like the board game is like it's instructions, it's like here's what you, but it's like here's your task, here's your checklist of things to do. That is very much like the goal of like what we are trying to achieve a lot of times, right? So if you can make your goals instructional, then like you have almost no choice but to follow them, right? In a lot of ways, because you're like, I know exactly what must be done. So rather than like, I want to get healthy, which is really hard to kind of define, saying that like, I want to get my cholesterol into a normal range by June 2023, that is a very specific goal, right? You know that it's your cholesterol. So now like all of the actions that you are going to take are directly related to like cholesterol health, right? You know that they're going to immediately have to do exactly with those particular things. So that's what we mean by like a SMART goal. It's very instructional in its nature. So it's a slightly different acronym in the NASM version, I will say. We're going to say that this stands for specific, measurable. It says attainable here. I like the term actionable, realistic, and timely or time bound or time oriented or whatever you want to say, right? So again, like we want to have a deadline. Human beings, man, we do great with deadlines. So when I say that you want your goal to be specific, right? A specific goal is one that has a greater chance of being accomplished because there's really no wiggle room. It's not general. If you told me what your goal is and I heard it, I know exactly what you mean, rather than like we have two different perceptions of like what that means, right? Like if you're like, yeah, I'm just trying to get stronger, right? My definition of stronger and your definition of stronger might be a little bit different. I want to get more athletic, right? Well, athletic to me means, one thing, and athletic to you means something else, right? So we want to identify specifically, right? And honestly, guys, if you do the S in SMART goals really well, the rest of this becomes a cakewalk. This is the most important out of all of them. So identify specifically what it is you want to achieve. Somebody who wants to lose weight is even less. I mean, that's not bad, but it's less specific than it can be. You could say, I want to, like, somebody who wants to lose fat, right? Like those are two different things technically, right? Now, if you're trying to lose weight to get into a specific weight class for like a combat sport, that's one thing. You're just trying to like lose as much, you're just trying to weigh less, right? But somebody who wants to like lose body fat, that's very different, right? That's somebody who is trying to like be leaner. And so they're two slightly different goals. A lot of times that's what people mean. They say they want to lose weight. That's what they mean, is they want to be leaner. But again, like, I don't know that. And maybe they don't even know it truly. We want to make sure that we say it specifically. We want to make sure that we have measurable goals. We also work a lot better when our goals are very number based. Somebody who wants to be rich, that's like, I don't know, it's hard to define. Do you want to be a millionaire? Do you want to be a billionaire? That would be crazy. Do you want to be, just wealthy enough, right? My goal wealth-wise is to, this is going to sound very, very specific, but like, my goal is to, between Lindsay and I, earn $170,000 a year. That's like the specific goal that I have because I read a study a few years back which says basically that, and this is in California, it's 100, but it would be different in other states. There is a certain level of wealth where any more than that doesn't really do much for you in terms of making you feel like happier or more secure. And so I was like, all right, what's the maximum number before, it doesn't have any more positive effects? So like, that's the amount, like, my plan for doing that is hopefully to have enough, like passive real estate income, in order to like kind of support that. Right. And there we go. We also have, so measurable goals rather than I want to be rich, right? It's not very specific. Tell me specific. Me, that's how much money I want to make. 170K a year. You know, somebody else, maybe it's like I want to have $1 million in my bank account. Great. Different goals, right? I want to eat healthier, right? That's a very non-measurable goal versus I want to get 4 servings of fruits and vegetables a day. That is super measurable. I want to exercise more. Pretty general, right? I want to go for a walk 5 days a week. Very specific. We also want to make sure that our goals are attainable. Attainable goal, another way to say this is actionable. I love the term like actionable instead. But it's a goal that is easily identified to know like what you have to like accomplish, right? What actions do you need to take to attain your goal, right? It should be really easy to understand like when the goal has basically been achieved or when it has been attained or when you've done it, right? So again, rather than like I want to be healthy, I don't even know when you're done. First off, we go back to specific. I don't really know what being healthy means to you, but I also don't know like what your end date is. Like I don't know what your end game is. If you say you just want to be healthy, it's like how would you define for me? What I often will say when somebody says that is I'll be like, okay, well, define for me what that means. Like, how do you know when you've reached healthy? Right? And they're like, oh, when my cholesterol is normal, or oh, when my blood pressure is normal, or whoa, when my BMI is in the middle of the BMI range, right? Great. That's so much more specific, middle of the BMI range, right? We can figure that out pretty easily. 18.5, and when it goes up to 24.9, divided by 2. All right, you want a BMI of 21.7. Like awesome. Middle of the BMI range, that's the middle. So once your BMI hits that number, there you go. Goal achieved, goal attained, goal actioned, So again, like I want to be healthy versus I want to get my cholesterol within normal ranges, 2 very different things. Your goal should be realistic. We looked at some of the math yesterday about like, let's say somebody wants to lose 10 pounds, right? 10 times 3,500 calories, that's 35,000 total calories. If they tell me they want to do that by the end of the month, right? It's February 3rd right now, right? So we have got 25 days to get that done. So divided by 25, that means a 1,400 calorie deficit per day, right? That's a lot. So that's basically, it's like, all right, well, you are going to need to basically be on a 1,000 calorie diet per day. It's just not realistic, So realistic goals are goals that can be achieved within the time and the resources available. Now, I will say, this is a me note right here. Do not confuse realistic with easy. Your goals shouldn't necessarily be too easy. We actually have seen this. This is one of the lines that I get to use next month in our exercise psych class, but we have actually seen harder goals actually oftentimes lead to more achievement. For instance, like we talk about like stretch goals. Stretch goals are amazing. They're goals that are like kind of just out of reach, but then you actually kind of maybe end up getting there, right? Or you at least get further than you expected. But it should still be within the realm of possibility, right? So challenging, but accomplishable. So I want to lose 10 pounds by Friday. Probably not very realistic. I want to lose 10 pounds in the next 4 to 6 weeks. That's a much more realistic goal. 6 weeks, we like, right? I have 1,400 calories, 10 pounds in a month. Totally possible for somebody who's very overweight, but a little bit less realistic for the closer someone is to their goals. And then time bound. Man, do we love time-oriented goals. So set a time frame for your goal. Give yourself a deadline. We love a deadline, guys. I will say, like, I've got another, just speaking on all the things we're going to talk about in exercise psychology. I've got one of my favorite videos just on the internet in general to show you guys, which is like this guy talking about procrastination. And procrastination is kind of funny when you talk about it a lot of times. It's like, oh my gosh, it's like, ooh, I waited to the last minute and then I stayed up for 3 days, but I got it done. And it's like, oh, you're so cool. You know, it's kind of a fun, like silly thing to talk about. It's like, ooh, I waited to the last minute and I drove 100 miles an hour because I wasn't going to make it on time. You know, like those are all kind of like fun and, you know, they make a good story and, you know, things like that. But there's this other version of procrastination, which is like the I will get to this eventually type of procrastination in life. And it kind of leads to this like where you almost feel like a spectator in your own life. You know, like life is moving forward and you're like, you know, yeah, I was talking about going back to school and now it's 5 years later. You know, like, and I haven't done any, I haven't even thought about it, you know? And so like, why'd that happen? And it's like, well, this idea of like this true belief that you're going to do something kind of just stretches into infinity because it's not really a priority in this minute, you know? This isn't something that's like keeping you alive. It's just something that you know, kind of like need to have happen eventually. Right. And so what ends up happening without a deadline is that it kind of just stretches into infinity in a lot of ways. And we don't have that much time on this planet, you know? So I do love like a good deadline goal because it kicks your butt into gear because you're like, you know, then you start to realize, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to get this done by this deadline, right? So if the timeline is not set, the commitment's too vague. I want to gain 15 pounds of muscle. Great. I want to gain 15 pounds of muscle by the end of the year. Whew, that's much more specific. Love that, you know? 15 divided by 52 weeks, that's about a quarter pound a week. You know, that can be done. That's right in the range of possibility too. That's great. So we take everything into account, right? Let's say a client, you know, wants to write like a general, you know, rather than I want to lose weight, they want to write a specific goal. I want to lose 15 pounds of fat by November 31st. It is specific. They are losing fat. It is measurable, right? They're losing 15 pounds. It is actionable, right? They're losing fat, which means they need to diet and exercise, right? It's realistic. That can certainly be done. And it has a deadline. It's time bound. So that is a SMART goal. Now, you can write a lot of different types of SMART goals. Doesn't just have to be, you know, SMART in general. You can also, you know, and measurable doesn't have to be a number-based goal every time, by the way. It just needs to be measurable, right? Usually it's number-based, but like, because we measure with numbers very easily. But you know, looking at the different types of goals that we've got, we're going to break three major categories down here. We've got outcome-oriented goals. This is usually focused on a specific outcome. A lot of people are going to set outcome goals, which are good, but you aren't always fully in control of outcome goals. Like an outcome goal is like to like win a race, right? To come in first at the Boston Marathon. You know, like that's an outcome goal and it's good, but sometimes outcome goals can be affected by other people and we don't have control over other people, right? So like it's not always our favorite type of goal. But to like, you know, this here is also a good example of an outcome goal, and that's great. You know, so outcome oriented goals are really, really good. But a lot of times what you want to do is you want to create goals that will feed into your outcome goal. So for instance, you might also have like a performance goal, right? And this is a goal where you are focused on a specific performance related to your prior experiences. Maybe you don't need to win the Boston Marathon, but you want to run your best version of it. I used to tell people when I was teaching cardio classes, and I would say, all right, last round, I want everybody in here to set a record of some type. If that's plus 0.1 miles per hour on the treadmill, I'm stoked. If it is plus 0.1 on the rowing machine, if you go 100, you go 10 extra meters, I'm happy. I don't care what it is, but I want one type of record. And I would even say, I want you to do this last with a smile on your face. That's a record, you know, like even if it's not like you necessarily going faster, because at least you were able to maintain a positive, healthy attitude while you were doing something. Maybe that's the new record, you know? So performance goals aren't always, you know, specific outcomes. They're more based on like you being the best version of you. And then process goals focus on focusing more on getting better at the process. So maybe it's not even about coming in first at the marathon. Maybe it's not about even running your best marathon, but maybe you want to run it with like a specific form. You're like, I want to do it this way. My buddy Patrick was really great at process goals. He was like committed to jogging for a little while there, all of Fryman Canyon from the bottom to the top, without ever losing jogging form, is what he meant. And so he wanted to always be on like the balls of his feet, basically like jogging the whole time with like that jog pace of like jumping from one foot to the other. And it was funny because I've seen him do it, and it was like at times he would have been faster walking, but it wasn't about how fast he could run Fryman Canyon. He wanted to maintain his form. And I was like, that's a really good example of a process goal. Just getting better. Like, again, I want my clients to show up on time consistently in the beginning. That's getting better at the process of exercise in general. Then we might set a performance goal of like, all right, we want to maybe get to, lift this much weight by the end of the month. So like that's where we kind of get like both of these goals coming in. Now, obviously, there's a lot of like barriers to exercise that your clients are going to hit you with. One of them is like they'll say they don't have enough time to exercise. Again, maybe they don't have time to go to the gym, but hopefully everybody has time to exercise in some capacity. Get up in the middle of your lunch break and go walk some laps, do something a little bit more physically active at home. That could be a big one. Maybe somebody says there's like, I just lack the motivation and the energy to get out of bed, right? Or get out the door sometimes, right? Okay, well then we need to find something that's exciting and enough to like give you that energy. Or maybe we need to find some way to like manage your energy, right? People who like me, I can't exercise at night. Like this has been true for me my whole freaking life. Like once I've lived a day, like once the day's over, like I'm wiped out. I can't go to the gym after work. I never have been able to do that. Because I'm wiped out after a day of work. Always have been. So for me, the strategy, that's a barrier for me that would keep me from working out. So the strategy is to completely avoid ever having to do that. And that's why I go in the morning. Other people, they can't get up. Cool. All right. Then you need to have a plan to go in later, find a way to like overcome that lack of energy. You have family and friends who don't exercise. You kind of feel like you just don't have anybody supporting you. That's a barrier. Great. Let's get you involved. Like luckily you got a trainer in your corner, but maybe we also get you involved in a group exercise class. Let's make some new friends, right? You just have to show up. It'll do the friend making for you, it's one of the reasons why CrossFit is so popular. It is a great community. They do a fantastic job with that. And I will always applaud CrossFit's ability to make people feel included and create like a community. I think they're great at that. And maybe it's just boredom. Maybe they just don't like it. Then that's our job, right? Find ways to make that exercise routine a little bit more enjoyable for our client so they'll actually do it. So summarizing everything up, obviously our role is one of encouragement and support. Hopefully today you saw a million different ways that we have to support our clients. That list does get a little extensive. It is important for us to practice our communication skills. That is something everybody in here you want to get good at. And obviously don't step into the realm of like therapist. That is outside of our scope of practice. Even though we are talking about psychology today, we are not applying therapy. And that's the next one, guys. We've made it to the weekend. How y'all feeling?